Welcome to the first podcast of the GreenEra Network Fake News. I'm your correspondent, Jim McGill. Coming up, an investigation by GreenEra Network researchers, which included deep background checks on thousands of climate scientists, have determined the real reasons why the vast majority of them are lying about the alleged science behind global climate change. More on that story later in this podcast. But first, a painting by American artist Norman Rockwell, previously unknown to the art community, but foretold in the book of Ezekiel and mentioned in the prophetic verses of Nostradamus, was discovered last summer by 196-year-old Gertie Cancerous of rural, unruly county, Wyoming, while cleaning out a shed attached to her ancient mobile home. The painting has apparently been seen by less than 50 people at a yard sale hosted in August by Cancerous, but rumors of its existence and descriptions have been whispered for months. The approximately 4 by 3 foot square canvas, entitled "Decades Too Late, Father Fondler Gets His Comeuppance," reportedly depicts a severely battered and bloody elderly man lying on the ground in the fetal position. Gathered around him is a mob of about two dozen violently angry men and women whose ages range from their early 20s to late 40s. They hold various objects including a shovel, axe handles, ice picks, hammers, crowbars, a wooden chair, and what appears to be the rear axle of a 1956 GMC pickup, all darkly stained and dripping, presumably with blood. Sinbad Corker, a neighbor of Gertie Cancerous, spoke to a reporter of our affiliate station KURL last week. In the interview, Corker said the painting drew a lot of attention in the neighborhood, not only for its violent depiction, but for the $250 million price that Cancerous was demanding. According to Corker, Ms. Cancerous had bragged to him that 2 days after a local Roman Catholic priest viewed the composition, she, quote, got a lot more than that, end quote, but wasn't allowed to say anything more. Since it's unlikely that a local parish would have that sort of cash, we reached out to Archbishop Enabler, Vatican spokesman for art acquisitions, for comment. Enabler at first denied knowing anything about the Rockwell painting. When pressed, however, he admitted having seen it and told our reporter that the painting was not a scene of violence at all, but actually depicts a group of concerned citizens helping a drunken man to his feet. He also said that the canvas would be unavailable for public viewing until it could be professionally cleaned and a suitable frame located, a process that, quote, could take decades, unquote. Last week, 3 days short of her 197th birthday, Gertie Cancerous died of complications suffered while recovering from a snack attack. Reportedly, her surviving offspring, including over 1,500 great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren, will receive their share of an estate worth about $400 million. Nearly 17 years after the shooting death by police of Victor Hiccup, Fredonia's ambassador to the UN, and the subsequent belief of a cover-up attempt that sent shockwaves throughout the diplomatic community, the mystery regarding the disappearance of his body from the NYPD morgue has been solved. As you might recall, in early February 2000, Ambassador Hiccup got into an altercation with 2 New York City police officers regarding his 721st parking ticket, and was shot at least 36 times, both officers having reloaded their weapons more than once. His body was transported to the police morgue and subsequently disappeared, an outrage that was generally believed to be arranged by NYPD top brass, though no charges were ever filed. Last Thursday, the truth was accidentally revealed, buried in a 4,000-page study released by the Centers for Disease Control concerning a vaccine that's been developed to ward off the diplomacy virus. This vaccine, which has previously only been available to members of the United States Congress and allows people to fight the urge to cooperate and negotiate, was developed from cells in what remained of Hiccup's blood. CDC officials arranged the secret late-night theft of his corpse in order to study it under carefully controlled laboratory conditions. In a press conference announcing the result of the previously secret study and a commitment to make the vaccine available to the public in early 2018, CDC spokesperson Dr. Martha Segelis spoke of a world in which eventually every man, woman, and child would be able to stand by the courage of their preconceptions and misconceptions without wavering, without compromising even a little bit. Dr. Segelis said, "We live in a world of people who don't care what others believe, who are uncomfortable with multifaceted truths, and who are ignorant and choose to remain so. This vaccine and the resultant diplomatic immunity it will confer has the potential to expand their self-satisfaction and erase any doubts they may harbor about the humanity and any supposed value of someone brazen enough to disagree with them." She also predicted that, quote, "within a generation, the plague called empathy may no longer complicate the human condition," end quote. This program is sponsored by sleep. Do you feel run down a lot? Are you tired? You don't have any energy? What are you gonna do? Have you considered sleep? Sleep is the #1 doctor-recommended therapy for that run-down, tired, got no energy feeling. Ask your doctor if sleep is good for you. In literary news, scholars have been debating the true authorship of the works attributed to William Shakespeare since the middle of the 18th century. Christopher Marlowe, William Stanley, 6th Earl of Derby, Edward de Vere, 17th Earl of Oxford, and of course Sir Francis Bacon, among dozens of others, have all been proposed as the true author. A fortnight ago, there was a new twist to the controversy when the International Poetry Archival Association's Committee on Minutia released a study that is initially proving to everybody's satisfaction that, due to a heretofore unknown speech impediment accompanied by a writing quirk he developed as a child while practicing his signature, Shakespeare's first name wasn't actually William. It seems unlikely that the authorship controversy regarding the great works attributed to Wilson Shakespeare will ever be totally resolved, but we will keep you apprised if there are further developments. In international news, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation is reporting that the last resident of Bungs Hole, Queensland, is leaving his home of 67 years to try to get a factory job. Mason Dix Aardvark was once considered to be the best sheep shear sharpener in a 400-mile radius. His book of poetry, self-published in 1973, entitled Quiescent Dreams of a Xenophobic Blowfish, sold over 45 copies. Aardvark was born and raised in South Dakota, but at the age of 20, became disillusioned with local politics and unhappy in his marriage to a woman who was 45 years older than he. In 1950, he abandoned his hopes to establish a diesel tractor battery museum, abandoned his wife and a goldfish named Stinky Toes, and moved to Bungs Hole. He has been sharpening sheep shears and writing unappreciated poetry ever since. During the last couple of decades, the sheep sharpening business has dropped off. In 2009, Aardvark's companion koala, Larry, went out for cigarettes and to take the tree grubs for a spin in the 30-year-old Ford Anglia they owned together, but never returned. Quote, "I need a change of scenery," close quotes, Aardvark told ABC's reporter Nymph Norbert after she drove 1,400 kilometers to interview him, then packed up an ancient backpack with a few clothes and canned goods and left on foot without saying another word. We at the GreenEra Network can only say, for God's sake, Larry, why? In science and tech news, officials in the African nation of Botswanaland have announced a government-sponsored program to develop a revolutionary space vehicle that will allow 2 men, a woman, and a Nigerian dwarf goat to travel to the planet Havana, take soil and rock samples, and return them all safely to Earth. Science Minister Eddie, speaking from Botswanaland's capital city Bloodlust, predicted that the mission would likely be able to launch by early 2023. It's unclear whether their intended destination is a planet that doesn't actually exist or a popular local restaurant in Cuba. GreenEra Network's calls for clarification regarding this crucial detail have, thus far, been ignored. And now a word from one of our worthy sponsors.
Bess is a dog. Bess eats, she sleeps, she craps, she sheds. She's just a dog. Not very bright, but what do you expect? She's just a freaking dog. I'm just saying.
And now to our top story. Climate change has been in the news again recently when it was revealed that President-elect Donald Trump's transition team sent a questionnaire to the U.S. Energy Department requesting the names of employees who have done work on climate change issues. According to the Wikipedia article, Surveys of Scientists' Views on Climate Change, and similar data published by NASA, 97% of all climate scientists who actively publish agree that global temperatures have increased during the past 100 years, and 84% believe that this warming is anthropogenic, that is to say, caused by human activities such as the production of greenhouse gases. According to Wikipedia, one study by James L. Powell, the executive director of the National Physical Science Consortium, analyzed published research on global warming and climate change between 1991 and 2012. Of the 13,950 articles in peer-reviewed journals, only 24 rejected anthropogenic global warming. In an effort to sever this Gordian knot that binds science to politics, we at GreenEra Network began our investigation, which started with the following commonly believed assumptions. 1. The vast majority of U.S. citizens, at least those who have never been outside its borders, agree that the United States is the greatest nation on earth, past, present, and future. Except for a few minor incidents in the distant past, or with regards to citizens who are poor or minorities, obviously unimportant, U.S. domestic and foreign policy is impeccable. 2. Since the U.S. is so preeminently utopian, the American electoral system obviously chooses only the most worthy persons to lead the nation. This is especially true of the president, who, due to American military might and a historical willingness to use nuclear weapons, is the most powerful man on the planet. 3. Through this unimpeachable electoral system, America, which very well may be God's chosen people, has determined that Donald John Trump will assume the presidency on January 20th. 4. Notwithstanding Trump's complete ignorance of Scripture, his unwillingness to try to emulate Jesus in any way, his boasts of being a sexual predator, and a dearth of evidence regarding any possible recent Christian conversion, the above factors readily lend themselves to the belief that President Donald Trump will have been handpicked by the Creator himself. And finally, 5. Candidate Trump claimed numerous times that climate change is a hoax. On Twitter, he tweeted, "The concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive." Given these political and theological factors and the scientifically factual data as it appears, if Trump feels he has viable reasons to weed out at least 85% of scientists, eliminating access to their skills and knowledge just because they don't happen to agree with him on global climate change, What's really going on? For the answer to that, we turn to the GreenEra Network's chief researcher and investigative reporter, Jane Butugly-Beardsley. Thank you, Jim. I led a team of reporters who did deep personal background checks on over 1,500 climatologists and meteorologists in North America, Europe, and Asia. This investigation led to some incredibly shocking facts. I've got to tell you, Jim, last evening, while going over the results in preparation for this podcast, I became physically sick to my stomach and passed out. I'm not sure about all that happened after that, but I woke up in jail early this morning and had to call my sister to bail me out. The police are saying that several people witnessed me walking down the middle of Broadway at midnight, wearing only my socks in single-digit temperatures, and screaming about the psychological differences between people who like Star Trek and those who prefer Star Wars. I'm facing charges of public indecency, vandalism for breaking the windows out of the local office of the Union of Concerned Scientists, and breaking loose a traffic sign from its pole. I don't know how I managed that. I'm also charged with violating Idaho Code 1221.23, unlawfully threatening to disembowel a vagrant dog that resembles Kirk Douglas with a yield sign. That's a felony in this state. What did your investigation show? We checked out 1,515 people who live or work in either North America or Eurasia. Approximately 2/3 of them were scientists who claimed to have researched climate change and published their allegations that such a thing exists and that it is very likely the result of human activity. The other third were meteorologists who have repeatedly reported unusual weather patterns, things like summers that are unusually dry or hot, series of winters with above or below average snowfall, and hurricanes of unusual strength or that seem to occur more frequently than in the past. In order to root out the vast conspiracy that must exist in order for climate change to be a hoax, we considered a number of factors that might lead a person to deceive, exaggerate, and wildly speculate that spewing billions of tons of carbon dioxide and chlorofluorocarbons into the atmosphere over 150 years could possibly affect climate in any measurable way. We boiled it down to the following 7 considerations. 1. Were they Chinese, or had they ever associated with a person of Chinese ancestry? 2. Did their friends and family consider them to be politically liberal? 3. Were they Jews or Satan worshippers? 4. Had they ever smoked marijuana? 5. Were they or close family members in the habit of frequenting thrift stores? 6. With the exception of causes related to family values, had they or close family members ever participated in an organized protest? 7. Did they prefer wearing jeans and or eschew wearing ties? 8. With the exception of culturally mandated holidays, had they largely avoided religious services during the past 12 months? 9. Had they ever belonged to Hillary Clinton's child molestation and pizza club, franchises of which have been spreading across the world since 1991? And finally, 10, did they refuse to celebrate Christmas? 91% of those studied were guilty of at least 5 of the above considerations. 4% were guilty of between 1 and 4. 4% were either mean-spirited or antisocial or practicing Negroes. The last 1% were just dum-dums. We concluded that the most believers in human-induced climate change are engaged in a conspiracy made up of a loose confederation of liberals, troublemakers, druggies, anti-establishment types, and subhumans. None of their scientific research or the conclusions they have reached have any credibility at all and can be safely ignored, especially in the light of what Donald Trump believes. Jim? Jane? The research and conclusions that caused you a great deal of emotional distress resulting in legal complications should help citizens sleep better at night, knowing that there is very little that people are capable of doing that would in any way harm the planet or our environment. Thank you for your insightful report.
And that's the way it is.
Not. May the forces of evil get pulled over on the way to your house for a busted taillight, and after being hassled by the cops, decide to call it a night. My name is Jim McGill, and I live in a green era.